B-A-T. It's in the name.
Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. Today, we are honoring International Educators Day, along with a couple of other national days. And we're going to have Dr. Laws Rushing II with us. He is the current president at Riverside Christian Academy, and he'll be moving in the summer over to Florence to hang out with Ben on a regular basis at Mars Hill Bible School. But we will have that interview right after these messages.
This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living.
I'm Travis Creasy. That's All-Pro Counselor Ben Hayes.
What's up, Travis Creasy? And good to see have everybody on the podcast with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And as promised in the intro, we have Dr. Laws Rushing II. How are you, Doctor?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking. And great to be with you guys today. And I want to say, first of all, congratulations. I heard the news that you had 100,000 plays on the podcast. That's huge.
Yeah, I think most of those came on your first appearance on the show. So we appreciate it. I guess this is the third time, really, because we broke the other one up to 2 episodes. But thank you very much.
Yes.
Appreciate you jumping on with us kind of last minute.
Yes.
And so you're doing us a solid and appreciate that.
Well, I can guarantee you one more play. My mother will be listening to this once you get it on the air, so I can get you at least one more closer to the next 100,000. So
there you go. I like it. That's what we're looking for. Just one more.
Those mamas are faithful to listen.
They are. You got to love it, and they'll tell you did good too. Which
that's right.
Yes, it's always nice to have one person.
That's right.
Now, if mom says, "Hey, you could have done better," you might be in trouble there.
That's right.
Be in trouble. But
bad news.
We did want to jump on, as I mentioned. It is International Educators Day. And of course, being the president of a school, we mentioned that you have your doctorate. So we know that you value education. I'm an educator. I just got out of middle school Bible, 7th and 8th grade boys. So any prayers that you can give me, I appreciate it. But they're a great group. We have a good time. And of course, Ben is at Mars Hill Bible School doing all kinds of things, as we all do at Christian schools. You got to be ready to do some of those sorts of things. So when you think of International Educators Day, Doctor, what kind of springs to your mind from that?
Well, I have a lot of gratitude to the folks that I work with and the dedication and commitment that I see in educators. It's truly a sacrifice that teachers make every day to be in the classroom, and there's so many expectations that parents have for their children, and of course that's great and it's wonderful. But teachers have just such an important role in society and joining with families. So it's a great day to celebrate what they do every day. And I'm in the classroom, a few times a week. I enjoy that, but I also know it comes with the price. And so I'm just grateful for the educators in my life that poured into me, who believed in me, who saw some potential, and so it's a great day to celebrate what happens in the classroom and those dedicated teachers.
I have kids. I just go into the classroom like once a month into every classroom in the elementary, and then a couple in the middle school. And it's funny because a lot of times I get from the kids, "You're the best teacher." I'm like, no. You see me for 30 minutes. I endure 30 minutes sometimes. I mean, I love doing it, but I think after those 30 minutes, I go, wow, these ladies do this every single day from 8 to 3 o'clock. And I'm like, they're the real superheroes. Like there is nothing, nothing that compares to what little patience I have maybe during that small window of time. I think these women are superheroes. And then, not to even get into all the things that, you hear online and people say, and parents complain sometimes about about teachers, but man, the things that they do, it's pretty incredible that they've dedicated their life to do that.
Truly.
I think unprecedented in this time is all the roles that educators are called to do. Some of them are in your contract, some of them are not. And so, as this podcast, we focus on mental health. And Ben, you're in the classroom as something that maybe we didn't have growing up. Maybe we didn't need it. I don't know. Or maybe we did and people just didn't know it. As having a counselor, a professional, counselor, mental health counselor there on campus is such a big deal. I'm a campus minister. And so some of that, at least you have to think about. You may not deal with it every day, but you have to think about those things and the trauma that these kids have faced. Then there's all the other things, and we could go down a list. I think back a couple of years ago, somebody had a cartoon, and it was a teacher going to work, and they've got all these things that they have to go through, carry with them every day. And that's before you get into the emotional needs of your students. And I think Christian education, we have to take, we're talking to the whole student, not that our public school colleagues don't do that, but I think we have a mandate, even in the life of Jesus, that he increased in all these different ways. And so through the example of Jesus, we feel a responsibility, but also an opportunity to be all these things that we can be for these kids is kind of an extra tool for these parents. And so, how does Christian education, Dr. Rushing, how does that kind of look into that? And where have you looked to inspiration? Obviously the scriptures, but are there any particulars or certain teachers that you've had?
Yes. Well, I think that Christian education gives a very unique opportunity for that holistic education and framework. And Christian education, no matter what, whether it's happening at home as far as biblical training or in the school, it is a commandment. And so, first of all, we're commanded as parents and as grandparents and as family members to instill scripture in Deuteronomy 4. And then we're finding too, it's absolutely necessary, right, to do this in an immersive way, because children at this point in the modern age are being assaulted with media like never before. And so children are seeing and experiencing information and data on an all new level, and being influenced in a powerful way through the media consumption that everyone's doing. And so we have to commit ourselves to an immersive Christian educational model to be able to even compete with that. And so I think Christian education, the calling is, there's no greater time to be in it. And it gives just such a unique opportunity to address the whole child, physically, spiritually, emotionally, and relationally. And it gives you all the tools biblically that you need to encounter everything that you're going to see in this world that is seemingly crazier and darker by the minute. And so I am very optimistic about Christian education, but there's also a little bit of a dark side of that, because it's just, we have to do it at this point.
I went here from the time that I was kindergarten all the way through. And so Mars Hill's had a big impact on me. And just setting the tone. I think people ask me all the time about, how do you know that scripture, or how can you memorize, some of these scriptures? And I'm like, I memorized those when I was in elementary school. Those were things that I started when I was in school at Mars Hill. And if it wasn't for that, then I probably wouldn't have known. It doesn't mean kids in other places, there's plenty of kids other places that are memorizing, but like you said, it's the parent role to do that, and really not Mars Hill's role or Riverside's role, or really even the church building, at the church building. It's the parents' role, but the parents are using various tools and resources, whether that's the church, private education, or whatever else it may be, to sort of shore up those values that they're that they're giving to their kids.
You make a good point, because that's kind of how I've always viewed myself as a minister, especially when I was in my 20s and had no idea what I was doing. And it's only slightly gotten better over the years, but I always presented myself, I'm not trying to be this kid's dad or his mom. I'm trying to be, this extra tool. That's what I am, to come along and promote this the best that I can. And so I think you're absolutely right. This starts in the home, and we want to be what we can be to help.
So it's being entirely intentional with bringing a Christian worldview to the student. And so every discipline can be conjoined to the Christian worldview and has relevance within it. And so I think that that's the strength. And this, this problem of education versus Christian education goes back all the way. I mean, C.S. Lewis deals with this in his book, The Abolition of Man, where he says that there is this very subtle thing that's happening in the educational books, to where they're taking away transcendental values and trading it out for feelings. That's what his whole argument in that book is. And he says this is a dangerous thing, because you're taking away virtue and wisdom and goodness and replacing it with fleeting feelings. And, we're more than just feelings. Feelings are important, but there's also these transcendental values that we hold on to that we've got to have, or otherwise there's nothing that we can speak of as good. And so that's going back all the way to the late 40s, early 50s, when he wrote that book. So this is an ongoing tension, an ongoing issue. And we have to even watch it within the Christian educational field, that we're making sure that we're being entirely intentional about bringing that worldview to full focus for students.
I know this is going to come as a shock to you, but when I was a student, and even now, I hear people a lot of times complaining, and every now and then in the stands at a ball game, you'll hear people from another school say, well, I can't believe they're doing that. They're a Christian school, and the reminder is that not everybody at a Christian school is a Christian. Not everybody at a religious school or private school, and not every parent is going to act that way. And then not every person that goes to a public school acts like a heathen either. So,
Yeah.
I think there's it's important for us to understand these are schools full of kids and full of parents on both sides of the coin, whether it's a Christian education or a public education. There are good people in both schools.
Absolutely.
There's trouble in both schools.
Yes.
In both kinds of schools. And so what the hope is that the teachers and the educators and the things that are being taught are teaching truths that you can't be taught in other places sometimes. And so you're hoping that you're able to minister to people. Even here, there are kids that need ministered to, adults that need ministered to within the Christian education, also the same way outside of it. So education across the board is so important. I don't know what the recent stats are. Maybe you can speak to this. Are there more or less people going into education these days?
Well, I know for certain that there is a teacher shortage. And so there is high demand for teachers everywhere. And people seem to be going into it less and less. A lot of educational programs in colleges and so on are smaller, or getting smaller, because people are not finding, the pay is not as attractive, the benefits, all of those kind of things, and people are finding more economic opportunity. And so, and they're seeing the challenges that come with the classroom and the scrutiny and the sacrifice. And then they look at the numbers that go with that, and they're like, well, I'm going to go into marketing, or I'm going to, and so there is a challenge before us as a society. Are we valuing teachers? Are we showing them that we value them as much as they're worth? And so, that's a constant struggle. And recruiting and retaining talented teachers is something that I hear not only in the private school sector, but my directors of school in this county would say the exact same thing. And they're trying to recruit my teachers too from here, which I'm like, stay away.
Yeah.
Especially from the really good ones. Like, stay away from them. I see you.
I think the good point you brought up is transcendental. That word, there are values. And growing up at Central High School, the teachers I love the most were the ones who projected those values. And they may have never ever connected that to Jesus verbally, but you knew by how they conducted themselves and those values, it came through, regardless of background or what was able to be taught and how it was able to be presented. But you knew, you could tell the difference in the values that those people had, and you had respect for them even if you disagreed with them. And so that word transcendental is perfect because it transcends whatever circumstance you're in. You'd mentioned something about wanting to talk about the apologetics of things and how important that is. And I don't think that's necessarily, it involves the science like Kyle Butt talks about,
right?
But the idea of making these things known and kind of challenging them as well.
Right. Well, I think that one of the goals that I have as an educator and as an administrator at a Christian school is to try to provide a robust faith, because obviously our students are going to go into different areas of life. They're going to experience and hear different voices, and some of that is acceptable, and we want that. We want people to experience life and so on. But there's going to be challenges both in life through suffering. There's going to be challenges through life intellectually and to faith. And so giving students the tools and to see the richness of the Christian faith intellectually, I think is a real goal to have in Christian education and as educators, because it's truly remarkable when you look at the intellectual history of the Western civilization, what Christian thought has brought to the world. It's an amazing thing. I mean, we have the modern hospital because of the Christian church. It was founded Basil in Cappadocia in the 300s and 400s. So these things about Christian history are worth reviewing and showing our students just how important Christianity is to the world, and all of the great thinkers that have come through Christian thought. We're not surrendering and checking our brains at the door when we go to church. We're not checking our minds when we enter the classroom. It's quite the opposite. We're using and maximizing our minds when we contemplate the great things of God and the character of God. You think about the great thinkers, Augustine, St. Anselm, and Thomas Aquinas. Those guys brought truly great intellectual insight into many subjects, from justice and freedom to the knowledge of God. And so it's an exciting thing for me to encounter those conversations. Atheism has a lot of problems. I mean, and as far as intellectually. So, when you address those and show that to students that, hey, there's a lot of issues intellectually with atheism. Number one, hey, a universal negative. Proving a universal negative is hard to do. There's chances are, think about how much you know and how little you know. Do you think that maybe in the grand scheme of all the facts that are out there, God exists? Could that be that you're just mistaken about it? So a universal negative, the problem of an infinite regress in the past, the problem of something from nothing, the problem of life from non-life, the problem of consciousness from inert matter, the problem of value that we find in human beings and human rights. Where does that come from? These are all huge problems for the atheistic framework that you can't just skim over and go, okay.
Several years ago, you had sort of this push among, unbelievers or atheists to, have churches because they needed that fellowship. And it's like, well, here's the framework God gave, but we're going to do it, just not acknowledge God in the process of it. But we need this group of people to be a part of. And then, just the ability of, like you mentioned, I think more the morality, the right or wrong, where does that come from? Where do those things stem from, if not from God? And I've had several conversations with people who are in education, people who are in the science field, a guy who works every day alongside the people on the International Space Station. He's on the ground in Huntsville, but he's speaking to them every day. And I asked him one day, I said, what, all the stuff we hear on the news about what science thinks about God and about creation and all those different things. And I said, you working with people on the space station, seeing the things that you see, knowing the things how has that impacted your faith? And he said, my faith is stronger because of it. I see God at work in the things that I see every day. And I said, well, what about the people around you? He said, the majority of them are the same way. And so I think this is going to come as a shock, but the media makes it as if every person in science field or education and all those other things, anybody who's, got a brain is thinking that there's no God and that it's evolution and it's all those other things. And it seems as though, at least with some circles, it's quite the opposite.
That's an exciting thing to be able to talk about in the classroom and discuss and to push when students are thinking that we're surrendering some kind of intellectual viability when we're not. We're actually exercising it in the very fullest.
I think it's ridiculous to say that God's not allowed in schools, because God goes wherever he wants. And it's also ridiculous for people to think, well, if I put my kid in a private school or a Christian school, they're not going to be some of the same problems.
Right.
Wherever human beings are, there's going to be problems. We're not here to protect them from the possibilities or the thoughts. We're here to prepare them for the inevitability that things are going to not go great sometimes, or there are going to be questions that we'll never answer, but it's okay to compliment or to contemplate them. And it's not the end of our worldview if there are some questions that we can't answer, because if that's the case, no one can even afford to have a worldview, because there's always questions that we can't answer. And that's part of the fun, is seeking those things.
And God's made us seekers, right? I mean, he's instilled that drive and ambition within us to seek truth and to find it.
And he's a rewarder of those
and
who diligently seek.
That's
him.
right.
And
there's a lot of things.
So
yeah.
I like that thought that spiritual forces can't be kept out of physical places. You can't put up a sign and go, no evil here, and you can't put up a sign and say no God here.
Right.
It's going to go where it goes. And that's why we need every bit of Jesus and the Father and the Spirit in our lives, so that we can combat it. So, we're just encouraging parents not necessarily to send their kids to a private school, but just to be aware of the forces, to be aware of the things that need to be in place to help protect your kids, whether they're in public school or private school, if they're going to a Christian college or they're going to a state school. The same issues and the same problems are going to be everywhere. But how are we equipping them to handle it?
That's right. And not all attacks from the enemy are intellectual. I mean, the greatest threat probably to the Christian faith within an individual is human suffering and grief. I mean, most of the time when you hear folks describe their spiritual journeys, and if it has ended in a atheistic framework and so on, most of the time it's not an intellectual problem. It is a problem with suffering and existential in nature. And so not only are we to equip students with this intellectual part of it, but also preparing them for that emotional part of life, because life, as beautiful as it is, there's grief to it. There's bitterness to it. There's suffering to it. And the Bible, the amazing Bible, the book, does not run away from that at all. I mean, Genesis 1, 2, and 3, you get into it, and the first thing that you find is human suffering. You look at the book of Job. And so the Bible is, and then you have Jesus who stands in the center of human suffering and sin with Calvary. So the Bible addresses it full and center, but being able to share that with students, because those are the kind of things that will come in contradiction to faith sometimes. But the Bible deals with those things.
This episode of the Helping Healing Humor with Ben and Travis podcast is brought to you by Heritage Christian University. The mission of Heritage Christian University is simple. We aim to advance the churches of Christ by equipping servants through undergraduate and graduate programs. HCU produces effective communicators of the gospel, focusing on evangelism and a commitment to Scripture. Heritage Christian University offers the following degrees: Associate of Arts in Biblical Studies, Bachelor of Arts in Biblical Studies, Master of Arts, Master of Ministry, and a Master of Divinity. HCU is accredited by the Association for Biblical Higher Education. Since 1968, Heritage Christian University has offered affordable degrees in biblical studies, allowing graduates to thrive in their ministries without the burden of loan debt. For more information about Heritage Christian University, visit www.hcu.edu.
As it is National Compliment Day.
Oh, it's not only International Teacher or Educator Day.
It's National Compliment Day. So hint to all you parents out there and students. Go ahead and compliment your favorite teacher. But what is the best, as the question of the day, what is the best compliment you ever received? I'll go first so you guys can think about it. My first year being the head football coach here at Riverside, we won one of our games pretty handily. And a coach that was a coach here at the time, I think I won't give away what sport he coached because it might come across bad, but he came up to me after the game, shook my hand, and he said, you're not as bad at this as I thought you'd be. So coming from him,
that's great.
That was the best compliment I've ever gotten as far as a coach is concerned. Anytime you can shatter expectations so easily, that helps. So I'm glad to know that at least at that point, I wasn't as bad as some people thought I might be. So.
Laws, you got one?
Well, I guess I'll follow suit as far as kind of this. There's a bit of self-deprecation in it. Being a head of school, you get to wear all kinds of hats. There's days here where people pat you on the back and you're Dr. Rushing, and then there's other days where you might be cleaning a toilet or something. But there's sometimes where I've been known to try to repair things, here on campus. And so, it's one of those struggles is repairing things. And so we got a report that, hey, the bleachers outside, there's something wrong with it. Somebody needs to go out there. So I go out there. Nobody's out there, of course. And then lo and behold, I fix it, and I'm feeling pretty proud about myself. I come in, I talk to one of my folks, and I was like, yeah, I got it fixed. I was real proud of it. And then she's like, oh, it must have been something really easy. And I was like, well, no, it was extremely complicated. And it took a lot of know-how, a lot of skill. And, and then the same thing happened yesterday. We've got this Jumbotron that we recently got placed in the gym, and so I had not touched it this whole time, putting it in process, and then I finally get up on the lift and I'm putting it together, and I come back to talk to my business manager, and she's like, "So was it something easy?" And I was like, "There it is again." No one has any faith in my building expertise.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah.
There's a reason I'm a teacher, right?
Yeah. Can we get some help here?
When I think about compliments and or things people say that aren't so kind, I guess it's a good thing that I don't have a great memory, because I kind of let both of those things go. I try to just sort of, if I get a compliment, I know that, hey, it probably wasn't me. And if I get, some disappointment, sometimes I try to at least tell myself they were probably upset about something. So I don't remember a lot, but I'll just, I'll think about one that I got this weekend. Somebody came up to me about my lesson last year at CYC. And it was just, they were like, I remember your lesson. It was awesome. I'm
Wow.
like, look, if I can get somebody to remember a lesson a year, then I feel pretty good about that.
That's good.
That's
I
a
feel
huge lot, man.
like
That's-
I can't remember what I preached on 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
much less, so the fact that there was at least something memorable in that sort of made me feel good this week.
So Ben, if we were to ask you what the name of that sermon was, could you tell us?
The name of it I couldn't, but it was it had to do with I basically started at the beginning of the Bible and did a survey all the way through in like
Wow.
25 minutes. It was just sort of like connecting the flow and I think it was Redemption for Me, maybe was the name that they gave it.
Nice.
But anyway, just the fact that somebody remembered it more than a couple of days kind of made me feel good. So
Fantastic.
But Dr. Rushing, we are so thankful for your
Yes.
time, for you joining us. Of course, we're thankful for your work here at Riverside, and we know you'll do great things there at Mars Hill. Number one of which, keeping Ben Hayes in line.
I know that's like I go from one problem to the next.
Yeah.
It's going to be, it'll be a lot of fun. And then that way I can, keep up with you. I mean, it's going to be.
Oh, I'll be there. I'll be pestering you. Hey, can we host the dodgeball here? Can we run here? Can we do this and that? So
I'm sure we can work a few things out.
we look forward to having you. Looking forward to it.
Well, I appreciate the invite. God bless everyone, all the listeners out there, and love you guys.
Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. We look forward to having you join us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.